Good afternoon, everyone. At this very podium, some months ago, I said that Australians would be tested like we have never been tested before, but we're a strong nation, and that we would meet those tests. And that will be true again now with the situation we're facing in Victoria. This is a global pandemic. There are no guarantees in a global pandemic. You have to deal with the situations that are in front of you. You need to deal with them consistent with your strategy and your plan, and you need to bring the country together to focus every resource on fixing the problem and ensuring that we can keep Australians safe and that we can protect lives and we can protect livelihoods. This is the challenge we still face. There has not been a day of complacency when it has come to dealing with this challenge, I can assure you, on behalf of the Australian Government. And through the National Cabinet, we have worked together to address all of these challenges, and that will continue. For the people in particular of Melbourne, this is hard. This is a hard call on you. It's tough, and it will test you and it will strain. But you've done it once before, and you will be able to do it again because you've proven that. You've demonstrated your ability to deal with this. It's happening in Melbourne now. Of course, there's always the risk it could happen in other cities, and every step is being taken to seek to prevent that wherever possible. But we're all Melburnians now when it comes to the challenges we face. We're all Victorians now because we're all Australians, and that's where the challenge is right now. And so I want to thank all the premiers. Spoke to most of them yesterday, spoken to more of them today, for the great support they're giving to Victoria, whether it's in managing the very challenging issues now on the New South Wales-Victorian border, or the testing that is being done in Tasmania or in South Australia, indeed New South Wales and Queensland, the tracing work that is being done, drawing on the health professionals from Western Australia all the way to the East Coast. This is a national coordinated effort, and over the last several days, that has been where my focus has been, working with those premiers, working with the Chief Medical Officer, working with those on the ground as we are coordinating our response to support the efforts in Victoria. And so that's why there are 350 ADF people down there supporting the New South Wales effort on the border. That's why there are already around 200 ADF who are already supporting in the area of medical testing and other logistical support. That's why there is several hundred, in fact, the numbers of Commonwealth public servants up about 800, 900, supporting the door-to-door efforts. So it is a very significant Commonwealth effort to support what is happening in Victoria right now. And we will prevail, and we will get on top of it, and we will protect the rest of the country, because as I've engaged with other leaders around the world, they are facing the same challenges, whether in Europe or elsewhere. They are seeing, as they're opening up their economy again and fighting for the jobs of their own citizens, just as I am fighting for the jobs of our citizens, then they find there are outbreaks and there are cases. The one in Melbourne is particularly serious, but on an international scale, it is well within the band. And so it is not surprising, and that's why we need to continue to apply our focus and our effort and just work together as we did in March and in April and in May and in June, and so we will do it in July and August, September, October, November, December, and into next year if necessary. That is what we will do, and that's what we will continue to do. So I do reach out to those people, families, young kids, older residents, people working in essential occupations, and just reach out to them and say, the nation is with you, and we will be with you each and every day, because your success is our success. Our success depends on how well you're able to get through. And so whether it's the mental health support that needs to go in, whether it's the housing support that needs to be in place, these are the issues that over the last several days we have been dealing with to ensure that Victoria gets all the support they need. So with those remarks, I hope that addresses, as it should, the very significant issues we're now facing. And now I'd like to turn, if you indulge me, to the reason I've asked the Aged Care Minister to join me here today. And I think this is important because as we deal with the challenges of COVID-19 and the COVID-19 recession that is attendant to that and has created these two great crises Australia now deals with, the work of government continues. The needs out across the country are just as present as they were before. And one of the most significant areas of need that we have been addressing as a government since the 2018-19 budget in particular has been the challenges of in-home aged care. Now, it was only last year after the receipt of the interim report of the Aged Care Royal Commission that we immediately responded to the immediate request that there'd be additional places provided for in-home aged care, and we immediately moved to put an additional 10,000 places. Today, I'm announcing with the Minister an additional 6,100 in-home aged care places, which will bring to an additional 50,000 places at a cost of some $3 billion that we have announced since the 18-19 budget. And every opportunity we have had as a government to increase the number of in-home aged care places since the 18-19 budget, the mid-year update that followed, the budget that followed that, the mid-year update that followed that, and now where we are here today, where we had hoped to have a budget obviously earlier this year, but that won't be till October. We believe that was necessary to make this announcement now, and we will take every opportunity in the future, including the budget and the mid-year statement that follows, to continue to address this task. This is about ensuring that Australians as they age have greater choices, that families have greater choices. We have many challenges in this country at the moment, but we will see our economy strengthen. We will see Australians kept safe, whether it's from COVID or the many other threats that this nation faces. And we will guarantee the essential services that Australians rely on. And this is a very good example of that, in meeting the needs of our elderly and the in-home aged care places that they need, and there'll be more. And we will do that in a responsible budget management, which the Treasurer and the Finance Minister and I and other members of the Cabinet will continue to apply the discipline to, so we can meet all of those challenges. But with that, I'll ask Richard to make a few comments about the specifics, and then I'm happy to take your questions.
Thanks, PM. So the additional 6,100 packages is evenly split between levels 1, 2 and 3 packages. The rollout will commence immediately and as the Prime Minister has said, that takes our investment in home care packages to 50,000 since the 18-19 budget at an investment of over $3 billion. And as the Prime Minister has said, it continues our commitment to providing choice for senior Australians in their age as they age, but also the opportunity for them to stay safe, be at home and age at home if that's their choice. We're also announcing today that the Royal Commission reporting date will be extended to the 26th of February, so that's a 3.5-month extension to the Royal Commission. The Commission, having had to close down for about 3 months due to COVID, had requested an extension, and we're announcing an extension to the 26th of February, and Commissioner Pagone will become the chair instead of the acting chair of the Commission as a part of the announcement that we're making today with respect to the extension of the Commission.
Thank you. Happy to take questions.
Prime Minister,
yep.
Our second most populous state is now shut off from the rest of the country. There are increased caseloads by the day. Is this more than just a localised outbreak that you've talked about, or are you confident that this is under control?
Well, there are 3 rings of containment, and the rings of containment has always been part of the government's national plan together with the states and territories. There are those suburbs specifically where we are seeking, I should say the Victorian government is seeking to ensure that containment measures are there. Then there is the broader Melbourne metropolitan area, including the Mitchell Shire. And then beyond that, there's the Victorian border. And as each of those rings does its job, it puts less pressure on the ring external to it. And I know that the New South Wales Premier, I spoke to her again this morning, is very focused on ensuring that there is appropriate protections around those border towns. And I saw the same cues as everyone else this morning. And as I flagged on Monday afternoon in a radio interview, there will be some disruption for a period of time as these arrangements are put in place. That's, I think, to be expected, and there will be some inconvenience, and that's regrettable, and we ask for people to show patience about that. I mean, the case numbers today was slightly less than they were yesterday, and we would hope to get better news on those case numbers. I mean, the level of testing has been significant. And we need to stay on top of that. But the isolation of those who are found to have had COVID is as important as it always has been. I'd be saying to those, particularly in New South Wales and those in the border towns, that particularly in the border towns, we're not seeking to see people move from there up to Sydney or places like that. I think for the time being, it's wise and good common sense that if you live in and around those border towns, you'd stay close to those towns at present and not be going off to family events or other things more broadly across the state. The Premier has indicated similar sentiments this morning, and I'd support that. Similarly, people living elsewhere across New South Wales, now's not the time to make your way to close by the Victorian border. That's just not good common sense. And we'd ask people to exercise good judgment about those things. There's lots of family events and other gatherings that take place, and if people could exercise some judgment about their attendance of those, particularly around border towns, then I think that's the right thing to do.
Given the breaches with hotel quarantine in Victoria, is there any case for slowing down the arrival of people into Australia at international airports? Is there a problem with the sheer load that's coming there? Should that be considered?
Well, the short answer to that is yes, and I'll be taking a proposal to that end to National Cabinet on Friday, and I've been discussing that with premiers over the last sort of 24 hours. I had a good discussion with Premier McGowan about the same thing yesterday. I mean, the fact is that New South Wales has been bearing the largest burden of people returning to Australia, and they're Queenslanders, they're Western Australians, they're Tasmanians, and New South Wales has done the heavy lifting on that and foot the bill for it too, I should say. And I thought that was one of the another good example of how the National Cabinet was working. No one was squabbling about money, about who was going to pick up the bill for quarantine. The large states, which were New South Wales and Victoria, accepted that and got on with it, and I commend them for that. Now, in Victoria, we've suspended those flights coming in, and that has meant that people have moved on to other flights going into other capitals. And we've looked at that, and as I said, I'll be taking a proposal to National Cabinet to slow that down as of this Friday. Sam?
Opposed to border closures, and you've said that the borders should reopen. So is it safe to say that you've now changed your position on that in light of the community transition in Victoria?
No,
and in
no, it's
relation to JobKeeper, there will obviously be a lot of anxiety now about when that runs out. Is it potentially an option to extend JobKeeper for longer by geography and just in Victoria?
No, look, 2 points. First of all, no, my position on borders hasn't changed. We need to understand what's happened here in Victoria. But what we've effectively done is Victoria has self-isolated. So that creates a protection for all the other states and territories at the one time, and it doesn't leave it to the arbitrary decision of one premier or another premier. I mean, my view about people moving from New South Wales to Queensland or to South Australia or Western Australia has not changed. When you have a situation of an outbreak, you contain the outbreak, and that outbreak is presently in Melbourne. And to ensure we don't get further breaches of that, that outbreak is being contained now at the Victorian border. And that has always been the approach. Arbitrary decisions about state borders is a separate issue, and we'll continue to maintain our position that Australia is one country. And that response that is needed in relation to outbreaks, well, that will be put in place and that will provide the appropriate protections, and that's what's being done. This is about Victoria isolating itself, not other states shutting itself off from Victoria. And there is a key difference in that.
If the situation escalates, will there be a need?
Oh, sorry, on JobKeeper, on the other issue. Well, I've answered this question many times, and I've been consistent in saying that there will be a further phase of support that goes beyond September. So there's been, and there will be, and I've said that to the Victorian Premier, and as I said to Alan Joyce some weeks ago, when the specific issues of Qantas were raised, and the Treasurer has said the same thing. There will be a further phase of how we continue to provide support, and as I was able to assure the Premier the other night, just like I can assure people in industries or in businesses or parts of the country that are more affected by COVID than others, then where there is the need, then there will continue to be support. And so this is about tailoring a national program to provide support where the support is needed, and because of what has happened in Victoria, obviously the need there will be far greater than was previously, and that need will be met. I'll come to you,
The
Sean.
McGowan government did ask for the federal government to help it enforce those caps on international tourists into WA. Is that something that you will do? And just on Victoria, Ministers Porter and Cormann say the AFL Grand Final should be held in Perth if it can't be held in the MCG. Is that something you'd support, that you'd like to see? And also as a Minister for Sport, maybe I could have your opinion as well.
I spoke to Premier McGowan yesterday. The issue is not redistributing the load from Western Australia to other states. I mean, Western Australia has been taking about a quarter of what New South Wales has. So I don't think there's a strong case that Western Australia should carry any lesser load than it has been up until this time. I mean, Queensland and New South Wales are taking far more than Western Australia, and the same issues need to be managed there. And Western Australia is a strong and competent state, and I'm sure they can manage their share of the burden. The issue is what the overall level of returning Australians are, and that's why I'll be bringing a proposal on Friday to reduce that load, which means that's a lesser load for everybody, rather than shifting Western Australia's load onto someone else. I'm sure Western Australian pride would prohibit any suggestion that another state would have to carry Western Australia's water on something like this.
And on the grand final, the Ministers Porter and Cormann said if it's can't be held in the MCG, which is more of a likelihood
look, to be
now.
honest, where the AFL Grand Final is being played at the moment is one of the furthest things from my mind. It really is. And the AFL, I'm sure, will sort that out, and states and territories will sort that out. Right now, we're dealing with a pandemic outbreak in Victoria, right now.
If the situation escalates, will there be a need to reimpose some of the nationwide restrictions?
That is not something that is being put to me now, or that's not the advice that we're receiving. Let's remember that 7 states and territories around the country remain in a very strong position when it comes to our response to COVID-19. That's what we're seeking to continue to protect. That doesn't mean there won't be cases in any of those states and territories, but the rest of the programs in those states and territories, outside of trying to deal with some of the issues around the border towns in New South Wales and Victoria, I'm sure the Premier will say more about that when she's in a position to do so. But more broadly, I think the rest of the country is getting on with it, which means they're opening up and their jobs are coming back, and that's welcome news. But obviously the impact in Victoria is significant and very disappointing, but is something that we will work together to build up again, just like we did last time. Yeah, Michelle, sorry, I promised you before.
On your proposal to restrict people coming in, are you thinking of a pause or of just containing numbers, and would people be likely to have to pay for their own quarantine?
Well, it's more a containing numbers. I mean, there is a volume that can be accommodated by the states and territories currently, but they certainly wouldn't want to see that increase. And with Melbourne shut down from that point of view, then taking on higher burdens is what we're seeking to avoid. In relation to paying, that is a decision for the states and territories. The states and territories can send people a bill today if they wish. And if they wish to do that, then the Commonwealth would have no objection to that. They'd be acting solely within their rights to do that. And I think That would be a completely understandable proposition for people who've been away for some time, and there's been many opportunities for people to return. If they're choosing to do so now, well, they've obviously delayed that decision for a period.
Do you have the pipeline of numbers that...
Oh, look, compared to normal volumes, Michelle, it's very, very low to what you normally expect, and it's still very low now. But at this time, we don't want to put any more pressure on the system than is absolutely necessary. Rosie?
Just on the rings of containment, to clarify, are you supportive of Dan Andrews' 6-week lockdown of Greater Melbourne? And on JobKeeper, are you suggesting that someone in a job in Victoria may be able to get income support for longer compared to someone in the same job in, say, Brisbane because of
No,
what's
I'm not
happened
suggesting that at all. We're running a national program of support, and that national program of support will give people in the same areas of need the same support. So it's not a state-based or program or anything like that in the same way it has operated up until now. It has been something that has operated nationally. It has been something that has been directed towards the, businesses that have had that fall off in turnover and to their employees, and similarly JobSeeker has applied across the nation. So these programs act very much as automatic stabilisers in these circumstances, and that's the design element that will continue. I mean, what we've done in providing the support we have is we've been very careful about the design of the support we've provided. We haven't made the mistakes of trying to invent new systems because of the great difficulties that that presents, as we saw during the GFC. And I note the Deloitte's report that came out this year, which showed that we were able to get the support out there significantly and sooner than happened last time. And I think that was because we followed that very disciplined position of using existing channels, making sure that it was well calibrated and targeted and temporary, and that's what we've done. I think all Australians know that that level of support can't go on forever, but the needs are continuing, and we understand that. We have understood that for some time, and we've been preparing our next phase on the basis of that understanding. Shane?
Prime Minister, what would bringing forward the 22-23 tax cuts to, say, the October budget do for the economy?
Well, any decisions on those matters are matters for the budget and other budgets beyond that, and so that's a matter that the Treasurer and I would address in the context of the budget, not today.
Face masks, Prime Minister, there does seem to be a shift in thinking on this from the World Health Organization, citing growing evidence, they say, that the virus is spread through the air. In view of that, I think the AMA is adopting a position in Victoria as well. Have you sought any revised or updated medical advice on whether
the
they
expert
should
medical
be more...
panel gives us advice on this issue pretty much every time we meet, and sometimes more often than that. So it has been a constant stream of advice from the medical expert panel of the HPPC, and they will continue to provide that advice, and we will continue to follow it.
Pam, just on China, the updated travel warning about Australians facing detention in China, are you expecting any sort of criticism from the Chinese government about that? And can you provide an update on your consideration of resettlement options for Hong Kongers?
Well, we are still considering that matter. Go to your second question, and I'll have more to say about that soon. In relation to the other matter, officials upgraded that advice as it's been communicated, and as yet I haven't had anything put in front of me, but from time to time travel advisories are changed, and on this occasion the officials have upgraded that advice.
Can you confirm on that question, can you confirm that your preference for supporting the people of Hong Kong is to use existing pathways rather than creating something new? And secondly, to follow up Rosie's question, are you supportive of the lockdown of Greater Melbourne?
We continue to be concerned about issues in Hong Kong, as many nations are, and we've remained in close contact with other like-minded countries about this issue. This is about how we as a nation are responding domestically to these issues. So these are decisions for Australia about who we provide visas to and on what terms and over what period of time. They are Australian sovereign issues. They aren't about other countries, they're about our country. And so we will make decisions about our visa program and how we run that in accordance with the rules that we set. And as I said before, I'll have more to say about that soon, not today. On the issue of the broader shutdown of Melbourne, this is a matter that the Premier advised me of, and of course, based on their advice and the advice that I've received from the Chief Medical Officer, then this was necessary. I hope it isn't for that long. I hope it's for as short a period as possible. But given the seriousness of the issue and the containment that was occurring in the initial postcodes and what was occurring there, that this was a more practical measure in the Premier's view and the advice that he had received. So it's not my job to second guess premiers on these things. It's my job as the Prime Minister to rally the governments of Australia and our own government and the people of Australia to support Victorians in this time of need.
On the tax cuts, Prime Minister, I note your earlier comments before. Can I just ask, are you considering bringing forward those tax cuts? I note your comment before. Are you considering bringing forward those tax cuts? It would seem from what the opposition said today with Jim Chalmers that they're seeking some clarity on that. And once we start to establish travel bridges with other nations, would you be looking to impose a tax on those Australians looking to travel overseas to help recoup some of the expenses the government has paid here locally and also to encourage people to travel at home?
Well, there's a lot of speculation in all those questions, so I don't tend to engage in what is the normal budget speculation when you lead up to a budget. Those matters will be addressed in the budget. So we haven't even concluded any arrangements with any other countries at the moment, and it'll be some time yet before we even were able to achieve that, even for New Zealand or potentially any countries in the Pacific.
Did you think about it?
Well, I'm not here to tell people what I'm thinking about. I'm here to tell people what we're doing, and the government is focused on dealing with what's happening right now in Australia. Those issues are not matters that are pressing upon the government.
Prime Minister, a large proportion of the new cases. Prime Minister, a large proportion of the new cases in Victoria of community transmission have come in the younger population, people in their 20s.
True.
How concerned are you about creeping complacency within the community, and what would be your message to those young people in Victoria and around the rest of the country that think this virus isn't their problem?
Well, it doesn't matter what age you are. It doesn't matter what job you have. It doesn't matter what your income is. It matters that we all just together continue to follow the sensible medical advice that has kept Australia in one of the most envied position in the world in relation to our COVID-19 response. And we all have responsibilities there, and we all owe it to each other to keep exercising them. As a government, it's our job to ensure we're continuing to follow the strategy we've put in place and support that with resources, whether it's in supporting people through incredibly difficult economic times, whether it's supporting our elderly with the announcement we've made today and getting on with the job of providing the government that we promised to deliver, whether it is supporting through the ADF on the ground the measures that are necessary to contain the spread of the virus. We will keep doing our job, and I know Australians will keep doing theirs. And right now that job is, if you're a Melburnian, is to tough it out. And it'll be tough. But know the rest of the country is with you. The rest of the country knows that the sacrifice that you're going through right now is not just for you and your own family, but it's for the broader Australian community. And I want to thank Melburnians. I want to thank them very much for how they're dealing with this right now. I can imagine the frustration. You can imagine a business that had just started opening up again and now they've got to close down again. Heartbreaking. Frustrating. Talking to their staff. Kids were about to go back to school. The uncertainty that is attached to all that, we all understand. But this is a virus that doesn't, communicate itself in terms of its intentions or how it's going to behave. We're dealing with a lot of unknowns here, and that means that there will be circumstances like this, and how we respond is what we have control over. We don't have control over the virus as such, but we do have control over how we respond. And I think how Melburnians in particular, and Victorians more broadly, are dealing with this very hard news is commendable, and I thank you very, very much for it. And we will stay on the job, in supporting you and giving the Victorian Government every help they need, not just the Australian Government, but all the other state and territory governments as well. On Friday, the National Cabinet will meet, as it does, on a fortnightly basis. There'll be a number of matters that will be considered in relation to this, and I'll be able to update you more about those things on Friday. Thank you all very much.